Hi, I am Injector Joanna. If you think that in the previous episode I showed you everything about my patient, you're mistaken. That was only the first level. I'm coming back to the exact same lips, but this time with a different perspective. I won't just tell you what I see. I'll show you why these lips behave the way they do. We'll look at muscle activity, at places where the tissue can be misleading, at areas that only look like a problem, and those that truly block projection. You'll see how the analysis changes when you stop focusing only on shape and proportions and start reading the lips layer by layer, from compartments, through tissue quality, to how the lips respond in movement. If after the first episode you felt that the treatment plan was already complete, today you'll see how many key decisions are actually made later. And that's exactly the stage I'm inviting you to explore in this episode. Lips are an anatomical structure made of compartments. These are small functional units that can behave very differently on the left and on the right side. Lips are also a muscular function. Their shape and projection are largely determined by muscle tone and by the direction of action of the orbicularis oris muscle and the surrounding perioral muscles. They are biomechanics. This means a system of force vectors that decides where the lips lift, where they collapse, and where support is lost. Lips are part of facial proportions. They influence aesthetic harmony, but also facial expression, how the face communicates at rest and during movement. And finally, they are part of the stomatognathous system. That's why occlusion, jaw position, and bone support affect lip height, volume, and the ability to project. So remember this: hyaluronic acid is only a tool. What truly determines the final result is the anatomical and functional analysis you perform before you ever touch the needle. Try to answer one simple question for yourself. What actually happened here? This is not a typical before and after sequence. It is a record of biology over time, 3 different moments in the life of the exact same lips. The first image shows advanced atrophy, loss of support, reduced projection, an unstable contour, and a clear dominance of muscle vectors over tissue structure. The second image, taken 3 years later, is even more interesting. What remained stable thanks to structural work, and what collapsed again due to aging and biomechanics? Which compartments held their shape and which returned to their original pattern? Which muscles started to dominate again? And finally, the third image, the result 3 months after another treatment. Here you see restored projection and symmetry, but the real question is, why did the tissues respond this way? Was it the technique, the product selection, or the reaction of the tissue itself, which over time begins to develop a very individual biological signature? In a moment, I will analyze these lips not only visually, but also functionally. In the first episode, I showed you the lip diagnostic chart, not as an extra, but because it truly changes how you plan a treatment. Now I'm coming back to it, but in a completely different context. Because when you look at this patient's lips, the chart stops being a simple template. It starts working like a map that guides you from observation to clinical decision-making. What is only an anatomical feature? What is a real limitation? And what will determine the entire procedure? And here is the most important question. Which diagnostic element actually decides whether these lips will be predictable? Is it the compartments? Is it muscle activity? Or is it biomechanics, the forces that pull the lips in directions you may not notice at first glance? In a moment, you'll go through this map, step by step, so you can see how individual parameters translate into a specific treatment plan, and why, without this chart, lip shaping becomes a bit of guesswork. You see a set of features. When analyzed separately, they look like standard diagnostic points. But when you look at them together, they start to form a clear functional pattern of these lips. What stands out the most is the mismatch between tissue potential and actual behavior. These lips are not weak by nature. They are poorly guided by muscles and lack stable support. That is why the diagnostic chart does not treat these features as simple descriptions, but as mechanisms that influence one another. For example, a flat upper lip on its own is information about structure, but when you also see dominance of the lower lip and an active mentalis muscle, it becomes clear that the upper lip cannot return unless the force vectors around the mouth change. The drooping corner on the right side is not just an aesthetic issue. It indicates overload of the depressor muscles on that side and a more collapsed lateral compartment. That is why treatment in this area must be different from the left side. Dynamic asymmetry tells us something even more important. Symmetry cannot be created by technique alone if differences in orbicularis oris muscle activity are ignored. This is the factor that can undermine even the best treatment plan if it is overlooked. And the sad facial expression, which at first glance looks like a purely aesthetic concern, is in diagnostics a signal of weakened support and dominance of the DAO muscle. It tells us that without structural work in the lateral segments, the result will never be stable. When you move to profile analysis, you are no longer looking only at the lips. You analyze the entire lip-chin complex and how it works with the facial aesthetic line. This stage shows where the limitations seen from the front actually come from. The first thing you notice is that if you enjoy this content and would like to watch the full episode, register for free on VOD Vismed Online and get monthly access to the latest knowledge based on research and real clinical work with patients. You'll find the link in the description and in the pinned comment. Additionally, with the code START, you can access your first month for a symbolic 2 in your local currency.